KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Dominique DiPrima. Show is First Things First. That's Nipsey Hussle. You know that. Welcoming in this morning one of the most prolific and influential voices in hip-hop publishing. He's a founding editor of Vibe magazine. He is an author and a journalist, a producer, and he will be appearing at the 14th annual Leimert Park Village Book Fair this Saturday, the 16th. The book, The Marathon Don't Stop, The Life and Times of Nipsey Hussle. Rob Kinner, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Dominic. It's such a pleasure to be speaking on KBLA.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. I guess first things first. The first thing is the book, right? The book's topic, The Marathon Don't Stop, The Life and Times of Nipsey Hussle, is the first biography of what most people expect to be many biographies, movies, television shows, to chronicle the life of Nipsey Hussle. And you certainly have written about a lot of things. You have done a lot of work in the hip-hop space. Why did you jump in, tackle this, and get it out before all of the other ones?
Well, I definitely felt a sense of urgency to document this young man's amazing career and really the movement. You know, you just played a record, What It Feels Like, where he says, young Malcolm, I'm the leader of this movement. And, you know, his career was more than a rap artist career. He was, as I don't have to tell your listeners, we're speaking to Los Angeles this morning. You know, he was a leader of the community. He was uplifting a whole community. And I thought that was important to document, especially because for most of his career, Nipsey Hussle really flew under the radar of the entertainment media. You know, he documented his own story through his music and through interviews that he did mostly with independent platforms, you know, and I think he's one of the most important and misunderstood artists in hip hop.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. Yeah, like you said, we're in Los Angeles, so from the perspective of a person who's lived here, the conversation or the buzz, if you will, about Nipsey Hussle started from the streets. It didn't start from the music. It started from the community. It started from his set. It started from his block, and then went to the underground music, and then went to the mainstream, and not the other way around.
Exactly. And, you know, as I say in the book, that I think Nipsey's career represents, to me, the ultimate fulfillment of the true purpose of hip hop. You know, it's one thing to blow up, become successful with your music, and then make alliances with big corporations and get endorsements and make yourself prosper. And, you know, very often we see that narrative where an artist becomes successful and they move away from the streets that raised them. What Nip did was completely different. You know, he stayed, as he would put it, 10 toes down, right on the same strip mall where he was selling his mixtapes. He and his brother were able to buy that strip mall, as you know, and build a successful business and employ so many people in a variety of enterprises, and, you know, just reinvested and uplifted everyone around him. And, you know, I think that's what hip hop is for. That's what hip hop is. It's not only entertainment, it's a means of self-empowerment, and you know, understood that very well and demonstrated it like nobody ever has before.
Yeah, I mean, I guess hip hop is a lot of things to a lot of people, but what you're talking about is like maybe our higher vision for what hip hop can and should be, and what community can and should be, and that's important. What's your goal in writing this book? When you set out, you're just like, what am I hoping to accomplish here?
I wanted to let other people understand why Nipsey Hussle was so important. I think for many people, there was a kind of, wake-up call. A lot of people, as I've been speaking about this book since The Marathon Don't Stop came out, which was in March of this year, so many conversations that I've had with reporters and even readers, they've said, I didn't really know about him until the Staples Center Memorial.
Yeah,
That was the case for a lot of people outside of Los Angeles. And although he obviously had fans all around the world, he would fly to London and perform. He would fly to Japan and perform. But, his movement was a local movement.
I mean, even in Los Angeles, Rob, if we're being honest, because I talked to some of my friends in the industry right after he was murdered, and they weren't up on him. They didn't understand why we were so upset until they understood why we were so upset.
Right. And I think when you see, there's three individuals who've had memorial in the Staples Center, and they are Michael Jackson, the king of pop, Kobe Bryant, who needs no introduction in L.A., and then Nipsey Hussle. And, of those three, I think most people knew two of them, but there were a lot of people that were just learning about Nip by watching this nationally televised memorial, watching Stevie Wonder sing, watching, a letter from President Obama read on the air by Karen Civil. This was like, why Nip? Why him? For a lot of people.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about why Nipsey Hussle. We're speaking with Rob Kenner, who will be at the Leimert Park Book Festival, author of The Marathon Don't Stop, The Life and Times of Nipsey Hussle. This is KBLA, Talk 1580, unapologetically progressive.
Nobody's perfect, but everybody's important. Don't change the dial. Your ancestors' favorite radio station, and your favorite morning show host. Let's get back to Dominique DiPrima right now.
We're talking with Rob Kenner, author of The Marathon Don't Stop, The Life and Times of Nipsey Hussle. He will be appearing at the Leimert Park Book Festival, which is virtual, by the way. No matter where you are, you could go to it. It is October 16th. It's from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Just go to LeimertParkBookFair.com. You know what time you're coming on?
It's in the evening. Hold on.
So closer to the end of... it's going to be an amazing event. Our own Ariva Martin will be featured on there. She has a show here at 10 o'clock, and she's talking about her book, Awakening Ladies, Leadership, and Lies We've Been Told. I'm actually doing a reading, believe it or not, of my mom's and my dad's poetry, something I've never done before.
Wow.
Yeah. So a little Amiri Baraka, a little Diane DiPrima for you. So, that's challenging, but it's my way of paying tribute to my parents, who are both accomplished authors. Did we find out when you're going to be speaking?
I'm in the midst of pulling up an email.
Okay, well, you know what? Just tune in. It's LeimertParkBookFair.com. I'm sure they have it listed. It's all virtual, so you can hop in and out, and they've got an incredible lineup this year. So I'm so glad you're part of it. Rob Kenner, you talk to a lot of folks, right? You talk to hip-hop artists. You talk to collaborators. You talked with childhood friends of Nipsey Hussle, but you didn't speak with his family. They chose not to talk to you, which makes this an unauthorized biography. Why is that, and how do you think it impacts the book?
Well, it's not exactly true that I didn't talk to the whole family. I did have a chance to speak with Nip's brother and sister. So Black Sam and Samantha, I had interviews with. But it's true that I didn't have, an authorized biography in the sense of collaborating with the family and having them review everything. And I'm sure that they will be doing their own projects in the future. I think there's a film in the works now. But, how it affects the book, I think, my project is a journalist account of Nipsey Hussle's career in context. So, I see this as the the foundation, if you will. These are the kinds of profiles that would have been done, when we were doing our thing at Vibe magazine over the years. An artist of Nip's importance would have had cover stories and in-depth profiles that explain where he's coming from and really put that all in context. And I just felt as if that had not been done in his case, with the exception of that XXL cover story that, he was featured with 10 other artists. And then, of course, the beautiful GQ profile on him and Lauren London. Those were well-done pieces, but I think there was a lot more work to be done. And so, I see my job as a journalist to just, place him in the context of LA history, American history, and also hip-hop history. And where members of the family have spoken, I did my research. The book's filled with footnotes, and you can, learn more and reference the original sources. But, I was able to speak with a lot of people who haven't spoken before. And I think their contributions are very important. People like Dexter Brown, who really hasn't been mentioned much in the story of Nipsey Hussle, but was such an important mentor to him. A Black photographer from Trinidad who moved to the community with his family and really took young Ermias Ascadome in, and other youth from the neighborhood, Cuzzy Capone, Rallo Styles. They had a creative haven right there at Dexter's home. And, for several years, that's where Nip honed his craft and really got the name Nipsey Hussle, was right in Dexter's house. I think these stories are important to share. And, I'm really honored to be participating in the Leimert Park Book Fair. For one reason, because Nip himself performed at the Leimert Park Malcolm X Festival under another name. He was rapping as Concept at that point. A very overtly conscious artist, inspired by people like Nas and Public Enemy, with very different type of lyrics than what he later became known for in the early, Bullets Ain't Got No Name mixtapes. But, it's very significant, I think, for this book to be included in this particular book festival. So I'm really, excited and honored to be a part of it.
Yeah, you talk about how Nipsey, started out as Concept when he first started rapping as a kid, and you really kind of take us through his whole life. From what I can see, I didn't get all the way through it, unfortunately, but I plan to. I didn't realize you had talked to Sam. That's big. But clearly this guy was a brainiac. I mean, he read a lot. You can hear it if you really listen to the lyrics. I only spoke to him once, but it was evident that he was just really, really smart.
Yeah. And when you think about the fact that, his teacher didn't bother to test him for advanced studies in elementary school until his mother, came to the school and demanded that they test her son. And of course he scored off the charts then. But, for a young Eritrean American kid, maybe the teacher didn't see the potential in him. And, of course, in years to come, he would be building computers from parts, and, creating his own home studio because the artistic drive was so strong in him. His whole life, he was finding new challenges for that amazing brain of his. And, obviously today, many of his ideas on marketing music and just brilliant insights have been adopted by the whole music industry. October 8th just passed was the anniversary of the Crenshaw mixtape, which most people remember because it was sold for $100 a copy. He had the audacious idea, in a time when people download mixtapes for free, I'm going to sell a limited edition CD for $100 each. And people said he was crazy. And of course, that night he sold $100,000 worth of CDs. And 10,000 of those dollars came from Jay-Z. So, Jay recognized the brilliance. And, of course, Roc Nation went on to represent Nipsey as a management company. But, that concept of the limited edition CD that is sold just to the hardcore fans has now been adopted by the whole music industry. So Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber, they all do the same thing now. But this was Nipsey Hussle's idea.
Yeah, and I think, those were solutions for how do we deal with streaming and the streaming model and all of that. The whole pay what you want thing. He made a splash with that beyond hip hop to, like you said, to the whole business world. And I think you make the case. There has been plenty of artists who have made a lot of money, who have done well in business, who have even innovated in business. But you make the case that there are different kinds of hip-hop capitalists, if you will, and that Nipsey's was a socially innovative brand, a brand that where community and progress for his people and community was just as important as the game, making money. I mean, is not a predatory capitalist model. Let's put it that way.
No question about it. I mean, that was one of the things that Sam said when I spoke with him, that we never respected people that moved away, that made money and moved away. And it never even crossed our mind to separate ourselves from the place that lifted us up. I mean, Nipsey remembered those nights when he had those homemade CDs with the magic marker title written on them, and he was, handing them out, and he said, give me whatever price you think they're worth, and if you don't like it, you can frisbee my disc, but just give it a listen, and he always wanted to give the love back to the community that gave him his start. And, that's one of the things that people admire about him.
Yeah. I have my colleague here at KBLA who keeps everything moving on the technical end, is also a rap artist. His name is Miles Lowe. And Miles has a question.
Yeah, and it's kind of perfect for what you just said, brother. And I'm 27. Nipsey's career took off during, my high school career. I remember the XXL freshman cover, him, J. Cole, Big Sean, Wiz Khalifa, Wale, and I really was always curious who this dark horse brother from L.A. was. Ended up being Nipsey Hussle, got into him and became a fan of him. But just speaking of him being a titan of his community and never leaving after he made money, how do you feel about that actually being his ultimate untimely demise, was being so accessible in his own community that he grew up in?
Well, that's one of the hardest parts of this whole thing. I mean, I began writing this book before the tragedy of March 31st. And so, I tried to focus on the great accomplishments, but, there is a tragic part to the story. And, in the book, you can read some of the reactions of fellow artists who have, supported Nip over the years. People like Rick Ross and Meek Mill gave their comments. And, I hope that it doesn't make people shy away from staying involved in their communities. I think that is, like I said earlier, that's the true purpose of hip hop. But obviously, if you could go back and do that day over, Nip would have had security there with him that day. He would have had somebody watching over him so that he could be helping out or doing whatever he was doing that day. And I think, hindsight is 20/20. If the day could have been done different, there would have been some protection in place that would have made sure that he didn't meet that untimely demise. But it's a terrible thing, and you never get over a loss like that.
To be honest with you, Rob Kinner and Miles Lowe, I feel like it almost has the opposite effect, at least in L.A. It's like we're going to buy the block 10 times more. We're going to represent for our community 10 times more, and we shall be fearless 10 times more, because that's the example that Nipsey Hussle set, and that's what he wanted people to do, and he was right. Like, if we don't buy the block, we will be on the auction block, like literally or figuratively. And that's my reaction anyway. And I get that reaction from people. I was out on Slauson for the, I don't know, memorial, I don't know what you want to call it, a parade, not really a parade, in his honor. And I got the feeling people were doubling down on representing for the community.
That's the best thing I could ever hope to hear from it. And I know that some of his business partners, like David and Gross, recently made an offer to buy the Crenshaw Mall with a fund that's backed by the whole community, a movement called Own Our Own, which is a crowdfunding initiative that he set up. He's the same individual who partnered with Sam and Nipsey to purchase the strip mall.
Right.
So if you're not up on Own Our Own, I encourage people to do the homework on that, because he's making it possible for people with even, small investments to participate in big moves for the community. And I hope that offer finally does go through, because that's
the Crenshaw Mall. There's a lot of controversy around that. There's a community land trust, the downtown Crenshaw, trying to buy it. But it's already that deal has been closed. And none of the community-based groups were able to get it. But there's other things to buy. And I don't know. I'm not speaking for the very rich. I'm just talking for the community. That's what I see. And I will say that when I was in Africa after Nipsey's murder, and I saw people in Nigeria wearing Nipsey Hussle t-shirts. So you're right. And maybe because he's connected to Eritrea, but I think it really had a lot to do with that piece about not leaving the community. Just got about a minute before news and traffic. Do you want to add on to that?
Well, there's a whole chapter in the book about his trip to Eritrea, and he went as a young man with his father and brother, and then again after he had released his album Victory Lap. And wow, it's such a powerful part of the story. It reminds me of Malcolm X in some ways, taking that trip to Mecca. It's a transformative journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to straddle multiple worlds, right? The business world, the block, Slauson world, and the holistic health world, the global African piece, all of that were worlds he was walking in, not to mention Hollywood, big business. Get into some news and traffic and continue our conversation with Rob Kinner, author of The Marathon Don't Stop, The Life and Times of Nipsey Hussle, KBLA, Talk 1580, Free the Mic.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
Nipsey Hussle in the media is very ironic.
Yeah, it's the heights of hypocrisy, and as Black Sam has stated, he's not going to stop until that strip mall becomes, the Nipsey Hussle Tower, and there's going to be a museum in his honor. There's going to be a housing development there for people who have economic challenges to get housing. There's a grand vision that's still unfolding there. And it's great to be able to speak about it today, because your listeners are in a position to, support that movement and advocate for
to walk right down the street and go. Yeah, that's where our listeners are right around the corner.
Exactly. Exactly.
You mentioned that, the industry, the world outside of LA and even within LA slept on Nipsey Hussle. Do you think it's more his business model, where he did a lot of mixtapes and sort of stayed on the underground and had his first, mainstream, a major label release right shortly before his death? Or do you think it's because there's this East Coast centrism in hip hop still, where a lot of the big magazines and papers are located in the East Coast, and there is a bias towards East Coast artists, in my not so humble opinion?
I think that, I hesitate to define it as East Coast, because, we have this old complex of like the East Coast, West Coast rap beef, and I don't want to stir those.
No, I don't want to stir them either. I mean, I don't want to stir them either. But it's not just in hip hop; it's also in everything, in media. They pretend like California doesn't exist, and I know that hip hop is much more diverse now because you've got the whole Southern thing and blah 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 blah. But there's still a favoritism towards East Coast rap.
No question, and I think I can point to specific interviews when Nipsey came through New York for the Victory Lap press run, which is a few days after his major label debut. The very first interview at 9:30 in the morning was with myself. I was very honored to do the interview at Mass Appeal, and I watched after that interview took place, and he hit some of the big radio stations in New York, which are the way radio works now, these are tastemakers for the world, and, he sat with major radio personalities who, one in particular, I'm not going to call his name, but you can pull up the tape and it's not hard to figure out. He said, "This is your first album that I've ever had a chance to sit with." And this is an artist who's like 12 projects deep at this point, and as I mentioned, it's not that he was so underground. I mean, when the Crenshaw project came out, 5 years before Victory Lap, Jay-Z bought 100 copies, and spent $10,000, and it got national press, international press. It was a game changer. So from big disc jockeys and programming directors not to have done the knowledge and listened to this body of work, it's just embarrassing. I don't know why people slept on him. I do think that there is just an industry bias. If it's not coming from the big label plug, if it's not coming via, the radio promo person that drops it off, if it's an independent release, it's on another tier. It's not considered, as much of a priority. And to be honest with you, Victory Lap album didn't get heavy spins in New York City like it could have, like the record is a classic, and songs from that album are going to play forever. But, again, it was only after the tragedy of March 31st that we saw the streaming numbers shoot through the roof. And, I don't apologize for the rap industry. We had a conversation earlier where you said, hip hop is a lot of things to a lot of people. And I have a different vision than I believe, what hip hop should be for, but you have to distinguish between hip hop and rap and the rap industry, and that's a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure. I know that. I mean, I've been around for a minute. I remember when people were on the corners doing it just for the artistry, and then it became all about the money, and it,
exactly.
and thus became more controlled by the corporate entities.
Exactly. But I think nobody loved hip hop in its purest essence more than Nipsey Hussle. And, he listened to every kind of mixtape. He had artists from Houston on the Crenshaw project, artists that were not on the radar of, a lot of people in Los Angeles or New York, He just listened to good music, and, he was into the LA artists, the Bay artists, he was into the New Orleans artists, and made alliances all over. A lot of people don't know that the record Hustle in the House was recorded in New York City. He had links all over the place and really moved. He was flying to Atlanta. One of my favorite things that I learned in researching the Marathon Don't Stop, I had a chance to speak with Rallo Stiles, who was Aramis Escadone's high school classmate, and made beats, and they got in the lab together in his bedroom and made a song that somehow came to the attention of Afeni Shakur. This is way before he was named Nipsey Hussle. This is way before any industry meetings or anything. And Afeni Shakur heard something in that record and invited Rallo and Nip to fly. Well, he was going by Concept at the time, to fly to Atlanta, from LA to Atlanta, and perform at a Tupac Shakur listening event, an album launch event for one of the posthumous Tupac tribute albums called Better Days. So, Afeni Shakur, connects with concept years before he called himself the Tupac of my generation. You can't make this stuff up. It really felt like destiny was calling this young man. And, I actually have heard that record. It's an amazing record. He's prolific for real. And there's a lot more music that people haven't heard that I hope in time, will come to light, because he's, like I said earlier, he's one of the most important and misunderstood figures in hip-hop ever.
Rob Kenner is our guest. He's the author of The Marathon Don't Stop, The Life and Times of Nipsey Hussle. I'm Dominique DiPrima. This is First Things First, and you are on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
Capital punishment. I mean, this is it couldn't be more clear what he was doing. And so Nipsey Hussle and YG were the only hip-hop artists to recognize that threat and do something about it. And the record that they made, they realized that they were putting pressure on themselves, that they were not making it easy on their career. But they knew that it was important, and they went ahead and they spoke truth to power, which is what, hip-hop artists should do. And, although FDT did not prevent, Agent Orange from being elected, it did stream millions of times during the most recent presidential election. And I think you could argue that it helped to rally the support for the Biden and Harris ticket. And, as we know, that was a very close call. But, we have to give FDT some credit for, tipping the scales the way it did.
Yep, and probably opening some people's eyes a little earlier on, because I think you're right. It was Trump was like Tony Montana. It was almost like a fictional figure that people in hip hop love for whatever reason, because they want to be rich and have gold potties. But when it became real, and part of how it became real was through that song. Rob Kenner, author of The Marathon Don't Stop, The Life and Times of Nipsey Hussle, is with us, and he'll be with all of us at the Leimert Park Book Festival on Saturday. We'll just have a few minutes with him when we continue before we pass the mic to Tavis Smiley. It's KBLA Talk 1580, 40 acres and a mic.
I learned later a little bit salty that we hadn't gotten back to him yet, but by God, he persisted. And he made his way up to the office of Vibe eventually. And so in 2009, I had never heard of this young man. He came into the office and presented his mixtape to the whole staff. And I was just very impressed, not only with his music, but his demeanor and his focus and his charisma. And after his presentation, I shook his hand and I said, keep doing what you're doing. We're going to give you all the support that we can. And he got his page in Vibe before Vibe ceased publication, because I think he had a better digital strategy at that point than Vibe magazine did, to be honest with you. But, he went on to distinguish himself, and I paid attention over the years as he did the Crenshaw tape, which we mentioned, was a game changer for the whole music industry, and eventually negotiated his deal with Atlantic Records. So by the time the Victory Lap album came around, I knew that we had to get him in for an interview. 1 hour conversation was really the catalyst for me to write this book, because I knew there's no way we could cut that down to a 5-minute YouTube piece, which was the plan.
Well, we have to leave it there. I guess they'll have to go to Leimert Park Book Fair and check you out on Saturday. I always leave with the quote. Nipsey said, "The game is going to test you, never fold. Stay 10 toes down. It's not on you, it's in you. And what's in you, they can't take away." I'm Dominique DiPrima. Tavis Smiley is next. Until tomorrow, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.